Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen public hearing. And we're here tonight to talk about the town warrant for the special election on August 14th. And the article will read, vote by secret ballot. The question, do you favor filing a petition for withdrawal with the Board of Education authorizing the withdrawal committee to expend $50,000 over 2 years and authorizing the select board to issue notes in the name of the town of Raymond or otherwise pledge the credit of the town of Raymond in an amount not to exceed $50,000 over 2 years for this purpose. So we're going to start tonight's public hearing out by, I have a small PowerPoint, and then we're going to pass it over to Attorney Dan Stockford, and he has, we'll be talking about the process, and here we go. In 2000, this is going to say how we got from where we are to today. In 2014, the RSU 14 board rolled out 3 options for a middle school, and across the bottom everyone considers some kind of a middle school. Raymond did not want to pay for a new school when we had a perfectly good school here in Raymond that Windham could send their kids to. Several public meetings were held, and the sum of those meetings were there was no way they were going to force kids to come to Raymond, meaning Windham people. In the fall of 2014, a petition to withdraw from the RSU was presented to the select board. In November, the town of Raymond voted to proceed with the withdrawal process. Regarding the meetings and negotiations to work on that whole process, in 2015, after numerous meetings with the RSU 14 board, select board, and the withdrawal committee, a new amended cost-sharing agreement was reached. On March 25th, 2015, the towns of Windham and Raymond voted in Windham to accept the new amended cost-sharing agreement. What the amended cost-sharing agreement is, originally when Raymond consolidated with Windham, the split ratio for paying the costs was Windham 55% and Raymond 45%. The new amended cost-sharing agreement was changed to reflect the decrease of kids going to the RSU from Raymond. Over the next 3 years, 16, 17, and 18, the percentage that Raymond would pay decreased. In 2018, the percentage was Windham 64 and Raymond 36. Raymond did not, once again, just to add to this real quick, is Windham, the school board was still pushing for a new school. Raymond did not want to have to pay for a new middle school in Windham, so a new cost-sharing plan was formed. It covers capital costs. The attorney for the RSU described major capital costs as, quote, new footprints. On March 5th, 2015, the business manager for the RSU at a public hearing at RES described the cost-sharing agreement major capital costs as, quote, construction that changes the footprint of the building, end quote, would be the responsibility of the municipality in which such building is located. On 3/25/2015, at a public hearing, public vote at the Windham High School, Sandy Prince, the superintendent, gave a presentation before the vote as to what the cost-sharing agreement major capital costs meant. He reiterated the comments made by Don Davis, who was the business manager at the 3/5/15 meeting, and said that major capital improvements were additions and whether or not the RSU has any lease or debt obligation for the capital project, it would be the responsibility of the municipality where it is located. Fast forward 3 years. The town of Windham wants/needs a new facility garage. It was voted down several times by the taxpayers of Windham. The town brings in the RSU to help, quote, sell the facility. The facility Windham wants to build is the top notch of buildings. The cost of the building is $9.3 million with approximately $3 million in interest. The facility will be owned by the town of Windham, and town of Windham has stressed that majorly. The town of Windham will be paying 75% of the cost of the building, and the RSU will be paying 25%. Of that 25%, 36% will be paid by Raymond. The town of Windham voted and passed the facility/garage. The town of Raymond never got to vote on whether or not they wanted this facility, but have to pay a portion of it. Raymond will never, I'm going to stress that, never own this building, but will be paying approximately $1.2 million for this facility, plus operations, maintenance, and repairs. This is a new footprint. Raymond should only be paying for operations, maintenance, and repairs, not lease payments. When talking with the Raymond RSU representatives, they did not have any answers about the facility except they were in favor of it. After hearing about the maintenance facility garage, the select board tried to meet with the RSU board and the town of Windham. Neither would meet with the select board. The town attorney sent several letters requesting a sit-down meeting to talk about the cost-sharing agreement, and they have refused to sit down and talk this out. On October 12th, the question was asked to the superintendent. This was at a meeting that was held in Wyndham regarding the facility. The superintendent was asked, have other alternatives of a new facility been explored? Sorry, typo. The response was, we had a partnership with Wyndham and we felt to go forward and stay with Wyndham. It made sense. We weren't really searching for any other options. The RSU and the RSU board did not do their due diligence in looking for another place that was financially responsible. The RSU currently pays $9,400 a year for leasing the current facility in Wyndham. This number will go up substantially with a new facility. On May 5th, 2018, the RSU board voted to approve the lease of a modular for 3 years to house the overflow of kids from the Wyndham Middle School. The kids can be sent to Jordan Small School because there is plenty of room, but Wyndham will not send their kids to Raymond. This modular is a new footprint. The cost of this modular should be paid for 100% by Wyndham, but the RSU is adding this cost to the general budget, and Raymond will have to pay a portion of it. On May 5th also, the RSU board voted to approve a 4-year lease purchase of a modular to house the adult education program. This program can be housed in either JSMS or RES. They both have room for them. This is a new footprint. Again, this cost should be paid for 100% by Wyndham, but the RSU is adding it to the cost of the general budget, thereby having Raymond pick up part of the costs. The expense of both of the modulars could have been saved by utilizing the buildings that are in the RSU, JSMS and RES. Other issues. The school is sitting on $6.5 million in their undesignated account. And with the following issues, JSMS and RES is using 9-year-old computers, and I believe in this year's budget they just voted on $1.1 million to buy 1,100 new computers. RES is going on a 5-year plan, I believe, for not having their playground finished. Most of the work has been done by Alyssa Messer. The playground was taken out of the 2018 budget because the board had to make, quote, hard cuts. Choice. This is a big issue with people, and this is something that people need to remember. A big concern of the people of Raymond is what happens to the kids that are going to high school. Raymond voted to keep choice before we consolidate it. We had choice before we consolidated it. We have choice now. We will have choice if we were to separate. Raymond student count. Our student count is going way down. As of June 15, 2018, the Raymond student population is as follows. We have 166 kids in the high school. 27 have choice. JSMS has 174. RES has 224. Our portion of the budget. Out of a $46 million budget for the RSU, Raymond will be paying $9.2 million. RSU receives $14 million in state subsidy. Out of that $14 million, Raymond will only be receiving $123,000. The withdrawal process is a 22-step process. Mark Eastman, I have him on here, sorry, Dan. Mark Eastman is a consultant that we are working with, and attorney Dan Stockford is also an attorney that we're working with that has done this process, and he's going to take us into the next steps as to the whole process.
Great. Do you have a PowerPoint as well? Or no?
I do. So as Teresa said, I'm an attorney. My office is in Lewiston. I've been practicing law for more than 25 years, school law for more than 25 years. And I've represented more than 20 municipalities around the state of Maine who have gone through the withdrawal process under the statute. I've also represented some school districts that have RSUs that have had towns withdraw from them. So I've seen it from both sides of the process. Mark Eastman is a former superintendent who I've worked closely with on several withdrawals, and he provides a great deal of expertise on the educational and budgetary aspects of the withdrawal process. I'm a lawyer and generally advise on the negotiation of the withdrawal agreement and the approach and strategy for withdrawal. So what I will cover is, and I'll try to go through this quickly, The procedures for withdrawal, the state identifies it as a 22-step process. I will conflate some of those steps, but it is the heart of the process is negotiating the withdrawal agreement with the RSU, so I'll spend more time on that. And I'll cover briefly some of the potential issues that in the withdrawal negotiations, issues that will need to be addressed in the withdrawal agreement, and then briefly cover what it would mean if Raymond voted to withdraw at the end of the process, and some of the issues are relating to starting up a new municipal school unit. So the first step is a petition initiating the process, and that has been filed, and that's why we're here tonight. So in a couple of weeks, you will vote on whether to initiate the process. And on this slide, you'll see the language of the question. Do you favor filing a petition for withdrawal, authorizing the withdrawal committee to expend $50,000 over 2 years for the purpose of engaging in the withdrawal process? The statute requires a public hearing, which is the public hearing we're at tonight. And it will be a secret ballot vote. Simple majority will determine whether the town will move forward with the withdrawal process. That's the first of 2 votes that you would take as part of the process. So there's a vote at the beginning to decide to initiate it, and then a vote at the end to decide whether to in fact withdraw. Once the vote is taken, the town clerk will notify the DOE, and then the Commissioner of Education will send a letter directing the Board of Selectmen to appoint a withdrawal committee. The withdrawal committee will have 4 members, 1 member of the Board of Selectmen, 1 member of the public, 1 member from the group that filed the petition, and 1 member from the RSU board, a Raymond representative on the RSU board. There will be a initial meeting of the withdrawal committee, assuming, in the event that there's a favorable vote on the on initiating the withdrawal process. Once the members of the committee are selected by the SelectBoard, there'll be an initial meeting of the withdrawal committee, and the chair of the RSU board presides over that meeting, basically just to kick things off. And then the withdrawal committee will elect their chair, and then from that point on, the withdrawal committee will engage in the process of putting together with the withdrawal agreement. Under the law, it says that the responsibility for preparing the withdrawal agreement rests with the withdrawal committee. The statute doesn't specifically state that it needs to be negotiated with the RSU, but the Maine law court has interpreted the statute, or the previous statute, which applied to SADs, which was identical, as basically to agree with the Department of Education's position that what the statute requires is a negotiated agreement. So the bulk of the withdrawal process consists of negotiating with the board of the RSU over the terms of withdrawal agreement. And once that withdrawal agreement is negotiated, then there will be a vote by citizens here in Raymond on whether to approve the withdrawal agreement and move forward with withdrawal. There's no specific dispute resolution mechanism in the withdrawal statute. The Department of Education has advocated for that with the legislature, and there's been a couple of bills in recent legislative sessions to include a withdrawal, or rather a dispute resolution mechanism, but that to date that hasn't happened. So it requires negotiation. If there's a stalemate, the parties can agree on a dispute resolution, such as mechanisms such as mediation. and often the commissioner will, encourage the parties to come to terms on an agreement. The statute provides that the withdrawal agreement be submitted to the commissioner within 90 days of the date that the withdrawal committee is formed. In all the withdrawals I've been involved in, that 90-day time frame has not been met, but the department routinely authorizes extensions of the 90-day period. So it's a process that's likely to take at least 6 months to a year from beginning to end. As far as a withdrawal date, the department has required generally that first there has to be a withdrawal effective date of July 1st, because that's the beginning of the fiscal year for schools in Maine. And what the department is now requiring is that if you want to withdraw by July 1st, you need to have the withdrawal agreement finalized and submitted to the department a full year ahead of that date. So for example, if Raymond was pursuing a July 1st, 2020 withdrawal date, you would need to submit the withdrawal agreement by June 30th of next year, about a year from now. Once a withdrawal agreement is negotiated, it is submitted to the commissioner for conditional approval. This commissioner has 60 days to act on it. Generally, it's a much shorter time frame. And once it's conditionally approved, the commissioner directs that a second public hearing be held. And that public hearing would likely be held here in Raymond. The chair of the RSU board would conduct that hearing, and within 30 days after that hearing, the withdrawal committee would forward the final agreement to the commissioner. I think all, with possibly one exception, with all of the withdrawals I've been involved in, there haven't been any changes after that public hearing. Usually the agreement stays the same between conditional approval and final approval. After it's submitted for final approval and the commissioner approves it, the commissioner sets a date for the final vote to approve the withdrawal agreement. And the directive from the statute is that the commissioner attempt to set that date to coincide with a statewide election, and given the requirements that apply to Raymond's approval of the withdrawal agreement, which requires a minimum turnout, it will be to your advantage to have it on the date of a statewide election, because there needs to be at least half the number of voters that voted in the last gubernatorial election have to vote on it. The referendum will be conducted. There's a public hearing that must take place before the vote, so that would be the third public hearing in the process. The SelectBoard would conduct that public hearing. It has to be held at least 10 days before the vote. The question would be, do you favor the withdrawal of the town from the RSU, subject to the terms and conditions of the withdrawal agreement? The town clerk would certify the vote, and as I said, it's a simple majority vote, but there's a minimum turnout requirement.
Can I ask you something on that?
Sure.
So what you're saying then is, say there's 2,000 voters, we have to have at least 1,000 voting, but there doesn't have to be 1,000 yeses.
Correct.
Okay.
It's just the total number of votes cast has to equal at least the number of votes cast in the last gubernatorial election.
Okay.
But it doesn't need to be at least That doesn't be the
Okay.
number of votes
Okay.
in the affirmative. Once the agreement is approved by the voters, the department is notified, and the commissioner ultimately issues a certificate of withdrawal. So I'll cover some of the issues that typically arise in withdrawal negotiations. The first is, how are you going to educate your kids? And the statute provides that for the first year after withdrawal, all students have the right to attend the same school that they attended or would have attended if withdrawal hadn't happened. And the statute also addresses what the tuition rate in that first year will be. In later years, the statute doesn't require this, but the Department of Education does. There needs to be a 10-year agreement that Raymond would have with another school unit, that for any grades that you don't operate, there's a district that will take any student that chooses to go there. That doesn't mean you need to send all your kids to that school unit, but at the very least, that school unit has to be willing to take any student that you might send. Often that is the RSU that a municipality withdraws from. In some cases, towns turn to other local school units for that school of guaranteed acceptance. But because Raymond doesn't have its own high school, correct? You would need to have an agreement with some school unit that they would take any high school kid that wish to go there. That's for, and as I said, that would be for a 10-year period. On the issue of school choice, unless the withdrawal agreement were to provide that you are sending all of your students to another school, to a particular school, your students would continue to have school choice. So as long as there wasn't an exclusive tuition contract for your students, school choice would be preserved. Yeah, that's okay. Why don't you bump back to special ed? Yeah, it needs to address who's going to educate your special ed students and who's going to pay the costs. Typically, you would be paying the costs of your own special education students, no matter what other district that they attended. For transportation, the agreement would address who's responsible for providing transportation and for your students and who's going to pay for it. The statute requires that withdrawal not cause a need for state-funded school construction within a 5-year period. So that doesn't mean that if there's an existing need for new school construction, that withdrawal wouldn't be possible. But the intent is that withdrawal itself not create the need for new construction. The statute requires that the agreement address how debt will be divided up. So to the extent that the RSU has any existing debt, the parties need to come to an agreement about who's going to be responsible for that debt. The agreement needs to address division of real estate and personal property owned by the RSU, and provides that there be an equitable division of property. The agreement has to address the district's obligations to its employees. So if there's a employment contract for the superintendent, there's often negotiations as to whether the withdrawing municipality will be responsible for some share of that for the remainder of the contract. The agreement must address collective bargaining agreements, continuing contract rights of teachers, continuation of union bargaining relationships, and the withdrawing town assumes the existing collective bargaining agreements as to employees that are in schools that the withdrawing town takes operation of. And the town then would be responsible for negotiating with employees going forward in schools that, employees in schools that the town continues to operate. The agreement must provide for transition of administration and governance, election of a new school committee, etc. It must address undesignated fund balances, and often undesignated fund balances are apportioned according to the cost-sharing percentage of each of the municipalities, and that is one of the issues in the withdrawal negotiations. So, as far as opening the new school, there's a bunch of things that would need to be done, and Raymond has experience in this area because you operated your own school unit prior to the consolidation about 10 years ago. So there's nothing earth-shattering here, but there are steps that would need to be taken between the time of the withdrawal vote and the effective date of withdrawal. Electing a school board, you could decide whether to continue on as a municipal school unit, a one-town school unit, or you could, if you chose, join an RSU or a alternative organizational structure, which is a looser affiliation among school units, in which school units share central administrative costs. The new Raymond School Committee would hire a superintendent. Wouldn't necessarily have to be a full-time superintendent, depending on the size of the district. It's quite common for smaller municipalities to hire superintendents on a part-time basis and pay them on a per diem basis. You would need a special education director. That also is something that often is a part-time position. Determine who will be principal of your schools, grants coordinators, IT, other responsibilities. All of those decisions would be up to the new Raymond School Committee to determine. Business services, accounting and financial services would also be an important thing for the school committee to determine. And one of the first things that the school committee begins working on once it's elected is to develop the initial budget. And that's an important process, and you would want to have the assistance of a superintendent or consultant like Mark Eastman to assist with that. Adopting policies to govern the operation of the new school unit, making employment decisions. You'd be taking on existing employees generally, but to the extent that there's any staffing changes that need to be made or new employees hired, those decisions would need to be made. Food service, transportation, maintenance, operations, all of those things would have to be addressed. So that's an overview of the process, and it's certainly an important issue to consider. If anybody's got any questions about the process or how it might work or what the issues might be, I'd be happy to help answer them.
All right, I'm going to open up to the public for comments, questions, concerns.
Sheila Burke, 63 Hancock Road. I've heard a lot of stuff about money, process, responsibilities, job descriptions, contracts, all this complicated stuff that we'd be getting back into as a town. But I really haven't heard one word about the education of our students. We're gonna figure it out. That's part of the process. You know, my concern is, Teresa, you're very passionate in your presentation, and I grant you that if we can't even enforce and negotiate our own current cost-sharing agreement, in other words, we can't handle that with another entity. What we're about to step into is much bigger than that. I'm extremely dismayed that what we're being told is that the rest of the RSU won't even talk to us. That just blows my mind on such an important issue. I'm assuming as we go along, somewhere, somehow, we're gonna find out what this is really gonna cost us. We're complaining about $9 million right now, if I understand it. It's too much. If we can't even enforce our current share agreement, 9 million is probably just the beginning. I mean, I have yet to hear, other than we're being ripped off and treated badly, why do we want to do this? So we need new computers. So in 3 years, and when we take control, we're going to invest the money to buy them all new computers. I want to hear about what we feel passionate about in terms to take this on. Why aren't we talking about how we're going to educate our kids? Never mind the rest of it. I want to hear what this has to do with education of the kids, not all this stuff. They have nothing to do with this stuff. They just want to be educated. So I'd like to hear some comments from, I mean, if the town feels it's going to cost us $50,000 just to figure it out, when we cut $1,000 here and $2,500 there, it concerns me. Will we truly make the investment that's needed to do this right and to educate our kids right? So I'd like to hear some more feedback from the select board, because this is huge. We have a petition, but I didn't hear that petition be based on anything other than negative, what we're upset about. I'm not hearing the positive side of the argument. Give me a positive reason to feel like we should support this. That's just my personal 2 cents.
Well, let me just, I'll let Ralph talk, but
Is
it wouldn't,
public comment or is this
Yes.
This-
select board comment?
public,
So does it go back and forth or?
what do you want to do?
It can,
if you want,
cannot,
yeah.
they don't have to talk to us.
I mean, the whole purpose of the meeting tonight is to get
Answers.
Hear what we're
feedback,
talking
so
about.
that, so that when you go on the 14th, that, you'll have some
Educated.
basis as to where the decision is, where your decision is, but, let's step back a little bit and look, where were we? Where are we now? Where would we be? If we look at, where were we? We had a Raymond school for K through 8. We tuitioned out our high school kids. Right now, because Wyndham will not send any kids here, Raymond has a K to 8 school. We tuition our kids to high school. Essentially, it's part of the budget, but we're tuitioning another. If we separate, where are we going to be? We're going to have a K to 8 school. We're going to tuition our kids to high school. So from the standpoint of, is it fair to the kids? There's not going to be much of a change there. When we were on our own, we had schools of national excellence. Is that where they are right now? No. They don't carry that same certification. So can we get back to that? Yeah, we'll have to do some work to get there, but that would be a goal to get back into those areas there. Raymond had a concept many years ago, the One Raymond concept, in which where there was areas that we could share responsibilities between the town and the school, we did. Where there was areas that, so did that help the school? Yes. Did it help the town? Yes. And we would want to look and do things along those lines again. So if the concern is, are the kids being hurt in any way? No, they're not, because they're going to be in the same spot they are today and the same spot they were before we consolidated. The hope was when we consolidated that we would have a true consolidation and they would look at total assets, total buildings, total everything, and come into a consolidated network. That didn't happen. So, did we help them by doing that? That's the question that's up there.
Grace Levitt Road. I understand the need to ask a question and get an answer, but asking a question and getting an opinion is quite different, and I understood the public hearing was for the public to give comment. The select board has made comments in previous select board meetings. So I'm unclear as to what the process is, but I have a number of comments here and maybe a few questions too. I have to take some issue with the first presentation. The amount that Raymond gets back from the state is not determined by the RSU, it's determined by the state. Is that correct?
Yes.
By the formula, okay. So it was presented in a somewhat, I feel, biased manner as though the RSU determined that. But that's a state decision, and believe me, I think there's some need to work on the funding formula, certainly for both communities. I take issue with saying that we have not been able to enforce the cost share agreement. I think there's maybe two ways of looking at what that cost share agreement is, as opposed to what some have said is it wasn't being done right. Some people feel it was done right. So I'm not sure that it's fair to present that as though it was fact. It just feels like there's a lot of bias in the presentation that was given first. And to say that the RSU board members from Raymond, or the RSU board in general, did not do their due diligence, I think that's very hard for others to sit in judgment of that. I trust that they did do their due diligence. I know the people sitting behind me that represent Raymond on the board, and I know that they certainly have looked at all the ins and outs as much as possible. I certainly take issue with the fact that before being in the RSU, we had schools of national excellence, and now we don't. So much has changed in education in the last 2 decades. There is no guarantee that going back to being on our own would produce schools of national excellence. So much has changed for students and their needs, and you need to all hear that from someone who's been in the trenches for quite a while. I'm looking at the cost of this. I think it's misleading, $50,000 over 2 years. Pay attention to the last few slides there. That's a huge cost for this town. You're talking about duplication of administrators, et cetera, to fulfill those roles. Oh, well, it could just be part-time. I know what it's like to have part-time administrators. It's not the best situation. So you really need to be thinking about that before we go further down this road. It was so much work the last time this process was put in place. Been there, done that, I want to say. Circumstances maybe are a little different, and maybe other things have led folks to that petition and signing it again. But I, for one, have been very glad that our students have a school to go to. The uncertainty of even a 10-year agreement, if you can get one with a district. What about the uncertainty of that school district that doesn't know how many kids they're going to have from year to year? And they have to plan budgets, and they have to provide. That's not a great place for schools to be. So what district out there in some nearby area is going to say, sure, we'll give you a 10-year commitment to take any or all kids, not knowing from 1 year to the next how many that might be, and what the impact is on all the kids in that district, not to mention Raymond students. From an educational standpoint, that's horrible. That's horrible. 1997, I can't remember the month, late winter, early spring, and I sat with my then 6th grade daughter trying to decide what we were going to do for the next year. The surrounding schools, many of them, wouldn't accept our students because they were crowded. Wyndham wanted a deal. They wanted a guarantee of a certain number of students that would come, where we paid the amount whether they came or not. We had a contract with Westbrook. That was quite a distance to go. And that was probably, well, I've had a lot of stressful years in my life, but not too many have come close to that. And the worry of knowing what that student, my child, was going to do for the next 6 years, because at that time we didn't have 7th and 8th grade either. So that was a big concern. It ended up working out all right. Wasn't the best choice, though. Her friends went every which way. you lost any sense of community. They lost contact with the childhood friends growing up. There was no way to maintain that because they all went to different schools. I was lucky. My daughters went to where I teach, so at least they had that contact. I had a community there of sorts with my colleagues and their kids, and that helped. And they had a great education, but it wasn't what I would have wanted. I would have much rather wanted our town to have one community with Wyndham, with whomever, where all the kids went and maintained those friendships and that contact. It was really hard. It was harder on my second daughter, but of course she went to the same place because how many directions can a family go in? But it was really hard for her to establish friendships, and that had an impact on her. So I remember that so very clearly, and I just wish we could have had one school district back then. And I was very grateful when the RSU formed because it could give students a sense of community. Yes, there are some that are going to choose something else for their sons and daughters, and so be it. But at least you had that option, and the vast majority do go to the Wyndham High School. And they have great programs and a great facility. And it just seems so foolish to be wasting $50,000 up to, not to mention all the other costs down the road, and the agony, and the upheaval, and the time. Maybe arrive at the same situation we're in right now, which is we're in the RSU. I hope that is where we do end up staying. This is just not worth it to me. Not worth it to our kids. And I question the timing of this vote on it. I guess by law it had to be after the petition was submitted or something? Or is this vote coming just because it's coming at this time? I don't know if there's an answer to that question. Because this is a pretty big decision to decide to go down this road and to appoint a committee and have people do all this work and have an expense to the town when we're so careful with our dollars here. Why aren't we having it at a time where there are many more residents paying attention, able to be here? Maybe they're away on vacation, but it's being done in the middle of August? Actually, I didn't even realize it was a vote. I knew there was a hearing tonight, but I happened to catch the sign and it said when the voting was occurring. So I certainly hope people are able to come and vote. Again, I take issue with some of the information that was presented. I don't really know that it was fact. And certainly with some of the other opinions stated. You know, you're entitled to your opinion, but I just don't like opinions being stated as though they're factual. So thank you for listening. I think I hit all the points. If not, I might come up to the mic again.
Thank you. Peter Levitt, 2 Levitt Road. So you can choose to answer these questions or not. I'll just throw them out. So and they are more the bucks thing. So first of all, to establish, some would say that after the last attempt at withdrawal, what happened was it was still a win because we renegotiated a contract. We got savings for the town. We got our proportion reduced. We got supposedly the footprint rule and all that stuff. If this is the mode that the town governance is going to go forward with, I would ask the attorney if there's not a better way to do this to enforce contracts and agreements rather than going through withdrawal processes in order to intimidate the RSU in order to the end justifies the means, because we'll come out with a better negotiated situation. If that's the mode, I would say, it'd be better to hire an attorney and just say, look, you were supposed to have reduced this 2 years ago, and you haven't talked to us. So we'll see you in court. Also, in the PowerPoint, the question was on, said that I think it was like $9,600 is what we're paying for leasing now to lease the area for our buses. And then it said, but it would be a substantial increase. I guess I would want to know what would a substantial increase be over the $9,600 when we're talking about multi-million-dollar budgets. But whether or not that's enough to get up in arms and rally everybody going down this road is necessary for pocket change when it comes to a budget in the millions of dollars it escapes me, the reasoning there and the efforts there. I don't believe you have to spend that whole $50,000. That's a ceiling. So it's basically written in the statute that you've got to set aside so much money. I guess another question I was asked at the last failed attempt that the town had, how much of that $50,000 was spent? And isn't that a nice fact to know? I mean, if it was $20,000 or it was $10? I don't know. So I guess I've got some questions more on the financial side of things. It's not lost on me that, in fact, quality hasn't been, talked about at all here, and to the greatest extent it could be, as far as focusing just on the dollars and cents. But I would be, I believe, on pretty solid ground by speculating that the primary reason why this withdrawal was unsuccessful the last time is it just did not make financial sense. Thank you.
I am going to comment on that. Everything that was on that PowerPoint presentation, I can find in a video, minutes, agenda. The point about the not checking out financially responsible for another building, Marshall and Don Willard were at that public meeting, and Marshall was the one that asked the question, did you check out any other buildings?
Yeah, can I jump in? The issue, Peter, for me was the building that they're building is the top of the line maintenance facility that can survive a nuclear attack. It's $310 a square foot. A building on Enterprise Drive, heated, sufficient to maintain buses, is $65 a square foot. When I asked Sandy Prince, have you done your due diligence in looking at other alternatives? His answer was no, we trusted the RSU. And to me, that made no sense. It's an expense, and the from 9,600 to 63,000 is the spread on the lease payments, not including additional interest.
$63,000.
63,000.
As opposed to
9,600, right?
But the 9,400 is what the RSU is paying, that's not
Right.
our percentage.
Right.
But based on that, I just totally lost. Totally just went blank.
No, so there's two numbers right there, Peter, that just didn't make sense at all.
I just totally went blank.
$63,000
Oh.
on a $6 million
For a $9 million, for a 20-year investment, and then we have nothing at the end, because those are just lease payments.
Well, here's another thing is there has not even been a contract between the RSU and the town of Wyndham fully negotiated
Right.
yet. They're building it, and now there is going to be cost changes because of the whole thing with the tariffs on steel and stuff. And as far as going to court, we weighed that out as an option as a board, the select board did. And it would start at $50,000 just to prepare for a court hearing without a guarantee to win. So what I did is I called Sebago, because Dan worked with Sebago recently, and to do 2.5 years, it cost them $56,000 to withdraw the process using Dan and Mark. And then the other thing is, on our last one, we stopped the withdrawal process because we felt it was the best thing at the time for the cost-sharing agreement, the change in the percentage, and I think we spent, oh God, it was so minimum.
I don't think we even spent $5,000.
No, yes, so it was low, so we thought that, yes, this is great, we did, but it's not, and what people don't know is because it was happening behind the scenes, is we have been working with an attorney sending letters to the RSU and to the town of Wyndham with no response. In fact, one of the responses back was, and this was the beginning of May, I don't plan on answering your email, your text back, because I don't plan on talking to the school board till at least mid-June. So these are the kind of responses we're getting. And like I said, Sandy Prince is on video saying that they have not checked. These other things that I put in here are all in minutes and agendas, is where it is. So everything, because I've learned to fight this battle, I better be able to back it up, is what it is. Anybody else?
Frank McDermott, Road. I back up everything that this lady has said about what we should be doing. If there's not about a better education for the kids of Raymond, then we shouldn't be doing it. If you're not willing to spend the money that it would take to build an excellent school system, then it's not worth it. I would like to see a presentation by Mark as to what a school system could look like in the town of Raymond with some ballpark figures on what it would cost. could we attract kids from outside the district if we had specialties? STEM education, music and art, whatever. I would believe what Mark told me. Mark was one of the best superintendents in the state of Maine, and the man should have been commissioner of education. He was that good. We would be in a much better shape today if he had been. But I'd like to see a presentation about kids and what's going to happen to the kids and what can we do. There's nothing any more important in this town than its children.
And
Raymond has produced kids who have become very active and adults who have succeeded in life. And I've had a number of them tell me it was because of the education they got in Raymond, because they had teachers who were dedicated to make sure they got that education. And I want to know if that's what's going to happen here, or if we're just going to put together a school system, throw a few dollars at it and say, good enough. If that's what we're going to do, then it's not worth it. Don't bother. Save the $50,000.
Go ahead, Rob.
I mean, that is part of what the process is, that we, the first step is to say, okay, do we want to start this process of looking at the whole thing? You then have to put together the whole plan that says, here's where we are, here's what we're going to do, here's what it's going to cost us. That's your gut check public hearings that you have along the way that say, here's what we're planning, here's where things are going, here's where we're going to be. At the end of the thing, you still have a final vote that's going to say, yeah, we think your idea stinks, or yeah, we think it's a good idea, so do it. So all this does is starts the investigation phase to get those things in place. It starts the negotiation to be able to do a separation. But yes, behind that you have to have the plan behind there that exists behind that. But right now the way the whole withdrawal system works, you have to take the incremental steps. The first step is to say, yes, we want to start investigating that. Then you have these steps along the way that says, yeah, okay, you're on the right path, or no, we think you should you should be looking at this instead of that. And ultimately you come up with that final plan, and that's what's going to get the up or down vote when that's done.
Before I spend $50,000, I want some kind of a commitment from the town saying, yes, we are in favor of committing to building an excellent school system. Because if you're not willing to do that, and if there isn't some kind of a vision of what that system is going to look like, then I don't want to spend the $50,000. Because if we get what we have now, only we're doing it right here in Raymond, then I'm not in favor of it.
Frank, I frankly don't see any major staff changes in the school system that we have. What I do see is a better morale, because I understand there's some pretty low morale issues over there because of the way Wyndham is treating Raymond and their school systems. And a good example is the RSU playground, RES playground. Okay? The teachers are not happy with that. So there's a morale issue. So I think if they separated, you would get better morale. You would get better quality education. And I think Grace can speak to that. If you're a happy teacher, you've got good kids.
Absolutely true.
Okay.
No doubt about that. But I want to see what the vision is for the program. Continuing just doing what we're doing is not going to be a reason to get out.
What changes would you make in programming?
I would try to have some emphasis on different areas that we don't have now. For example, before we went to the RSU, we had a wonderful technology program.
And why don't we have that now?
Because the RSU threw it out of Raymond
Exactly.
because Wyndham doesn't have it.
Exactly. That's where we are.
Then are we going to reinstate that? Are we going to have emphasis on academics for everyone? I want to see what a good school system will look like in Raymond. And I'm not worried about counting pennies to do it.
No,
And I'm
Frank,
afraid that that's what it's going to
No.
end up being.
I've looked at the numbers. I looked at the numbers first time around. I looked at them really close with Dot Moet and all that. And we decided that, and I think we made a decision after the RSU came in and cut their shares.
Yes.
We decided, okay, that's good enough for now, we'll back down. But I think this time around, I would be the first to admit that it may cost us some money in the short run, to get a school up and running the way we want it. But I think in the long term, we're gonna get a better education, we're gonna get a better school system, and we're gonna have better morale in our school teachers.
And that's what we want to have happen, but I would like to have some kind of a vision of what this is gonna look like.
I have faith in our teachers.
That's why I think if Mark could make a presentation before the vote on the 14th, to give us an idea of what a school system in this town could look like if the select board and the people of the town are willing to spend the money to get there, then that's fine. I'll give you $100,000. But I want to know what the outcome's going to look like. And nobody's telling me what the outcome's going to look
You're
like.
asking for the final report before the first.
Yeah, but the
before the first
50,000
planning
is going to
session.
be spent.
So,
Yeah, we're gonna
no,
spend,
that's not, no, no,
we're
no,
gonna
no.
spend
I take
$50,000
That's
to
Wait,
not
wait,
what
wait,
he
hold on,
asked
hold on,
for.
stop me,
No.
hold on.
That is not what he asked for. He asked for a final report before the first planning meeting.
No, we're asking for a different report. I would spend $100,000 to create a vision of an educational plan in the town of Raymond. And then from there, go forward with a withdrawal, if that's what it is. But I guess none of us know we're gonna get out, and there's a lot of negotiation about debt and contracts and all this stuff. But what do we wanna build? I think that's what Frank is, then that's what I'm asking for. I mean, I don't mind spending the money if I know what we're gonna, if we're truly gonna build schools of excellence. But what I heard Ralph say is, it's basically the same as it was before. It's not gonna hurt the kids, you know?
Well,
And it's
here-
not. And why aren't we studying what we wanna be before we decide to get out of what we are? That's all.
I don't think we can. We don't have a crystal ball. But here is the feedback, because I'm the one that was doing, hold on. Here's the one, I was the one that was doing all the signatures. What people are not happy about in this town is lack of say, lack of control, the high bills. Have a good night, Sheila. Oh, thanks. And their bills in paying for things that's happening and needless spending in Wyndham right now. When I'm getting letters from townspeople that say, I can't afford this increase. I have so much faith in our school teachers that they're gonna carry our kids like they always have. And you know what? It's up to the new school board and the town of Raymond as to when that new school board comes on and presents this, their new budget to the town of Raymond, then it's up to the town of Raymond people to say, yes, this is what we want for our kids. It's not the select board's job. We're just here to say, you know what? We need to look at the overall picture. But when we've got budgets in our town that our municipal is what, 17%, and the school budget is 83%? And so to me, we have a good school, we have good teachers, and we have faith in those teachers, is what it is. But it's up to the school board. And I don't think Mark Eastman know how, so I agree, he's good, but I don't think he can get his crystal ball out, Frank, and say what this town's gonna look like when we have.
I mean, ultimately, it's up to the Raymond,
Hold on.
right. Ultimately, it's up to the Raymond School Committee to make those decisions. And,
Thank you.
I mean, my experience has been that one of the primary movers in withdrawal efforts, successful withdrawal efforts, have been the desire to control your own destiny. And I'm hearing some feedback that that some decisions have been made since the RSU was formed that perhaps Raymond, at least some people aren't that happy with. And the fact is Raymond has limited say on the school board as part of the RSU. Raymond would control its, would control
They'd have
the
control back
decision.
in their own
Yeah.
hands.
Yeah.
We'd have the town meetings that people can come and speak up and ask their questions and say what they want for their town.
Joe, excuse me, Joe Bruno, Christina Court, and Raymond. Let me give you a little history. 1989, we were negotiating contracts with school districts to take our kids, and they were all offering us 10%, 15% discounts on tuition because they all wanted our kids. And we had over 700 kids at the time. Right now, we're down to under 600. We've had a 20% drop in the number of students in Raymond, and our student population is continuing to drop. I remember back in like 92 when we were looking at Raymond Elementary School, I was the chair of the school board. We had a projection that said we'd be at 1,000 kids by like 2005. We never even came close. You know, we had a recession, everything stopped, people weren't moving back to Raymond. So let's fast forward a little bit. I was the chair of the Raymond delegation to form the RSU, and we had negotiations. And they were tough negotiations because, you know, they were putting Raymond in a position saying, you know, of like just giving everything to Wyndham. And so we negotiated, and I said, okay, you know, not a bad deal. The town voted for the RSU to be formed. And Frank could probably go back to the 1970s, 60, 65, when all our kids went to Wyndham anyway. What was it called back then? An AOS or a union? It was a school union, right? Right. So then, I was the chair of the negotiation for the withdrawal. We thought we cut a pretty good deal, and when you looked at our budget, we cannot provide the same thing as the RSU did as long as they stuck to the plan. Now, what aggravated this whole thing was this building of a garage that was a runaround, an end runaround of what the agreement was. That's what started this whole thing.
Yeah.
How can you build a facility, make the school pay part of that bond, and not call it a new footprint? So that's how we got here. Now, the school budget's $9.2 billion. Sorry,
Our shares.
I'm thinking of federal dollars here. Yeah, $9.2 million, our share in Raymond. When we looked at it 3 years ago, I think it was maybe 4 years ago for the withdrawal, we were thinking that $8.5 million is about where we'd have to be. So here we are. We're at $9.2 million for 500 and something kids. That's a lot of money per student. Now, we could go back to where we were in the 80s and 90s of an excellent school system. I have no doubt about it. For the kind of money that we're spending right now, we bring back local control. We can negotiate a better deal with Wyndham than we have right now. It wouldn't cost us as much to tuition our kids to Wyndham. They want our kids. They have a lot of debt service on that high school. Raymond pays a pretty good share of that debt service on that high school. So they're going to want our kids anyway. But we can negotiate a better deal. This is just the next step to negotiating a better deal than what we have now. If they came to the select board, if the school board and the superintendent came to the select board, we wouldn't be here right now. Because we could have talked about it and said, okay, tell me how we got here. Tell me why you expect us to pay this. There was never a discussion. So it tied the hands of the select board, and that's where we're at. So there's a little history lesson, town of Raymond. Frank could probably go back further than me, but you know that's how we got here.
Yeah.
But there are many high schools out there that will negotiate a contract with you. I am not concerned about that one bit. So.
Well, I mean, the fact is, if we can't get one to guarantee, then it stops anyway, because the DOE would not approve a dissolution if you don't have a guaranteed receiving school. So the fact of saying, you know, the fact that, oh, well, maybe no one will take it. Well, if that's the case, then it's a dead issue anyway, because DOE will not approve the separation if we can't have a receiving school, so.
I agree with Joe. That's never going to happen. I'll tell you why. Because it doesn't cost them that much to educate those kids. They'd be still paying almost the same amount of money. And I have a quick story to tell you about that. We were having some real issues with Wyndham as far as the contract for secondary education, and they were really trying to put it to us. So I went to Westbrook and sat down with Ed Conley, the superintendent, and we negotiated a contract that he would start taking Raymond students. Not only taking Raymond students, but he would bus them. Both ways. And he sent marching bands up here, he sent everything up here, and I'll tell you, that first year, half the students went to Westbrook, and many of them stayed in Westbrook and got a great education. And Ed was smart, because what he did, he banked the dollars I was sending him. And he gets up at a school board meeting one night and says, I'm going to build 2 new computer labs, one in the high school and one in the middle school, and it's not going to cost you a penny of Westbrook's taxpayers' money. And they said, how? He said, because I've banked all that money we got from Raymond, we didn't need to spend it at the high school, and I have more than enough money to build both of those labs. And that happens, and we would never have to worry about schools not wanting to take our kids, believe me.
We're seriously getting a history lesson tonight.
We have not had a high school.
I like these history lessons.
At the Historical Society, people ask me why we don't have high school in Raymond, and I tell them because we never had kids that were smart enough to go to one.
Anybody else with comment, question, concern? Anybody from the board up here want to say anything?
Yes. I think that a small part of the problem, but a part of the problem is our lack of fair representation on the school board. 6-3 is not a good number at all. And especially when you see the 3 vote with the 6, that makes it worse. And I have yet to see a no vote when it favored Raymond come from the school board. So I think what I'm suggesting is that if we got our own Raymond dedicated school board, we would have a much better system.
You'd have a board that's fighting for the kids all
Right.
in Raymond.
Not for Wyndham.
Would you like to add anything onto this, or?
Nope, I don't think I have anything to add. Good discussion.
Don't want to stick his finger in the hornet's nest.
That's it.
All right, then I am closing this public hearing, and there is a vote. It's an all-day vote on August 14th. It's literally like an election day, and it's going to be in the cafeteria at Jordan Small School because the gym is having their floors done. So please spread the word, get out and vote, and see what the next step takes us. So I thank everybody for coming out. I thank you for the comments, the questions, the concerns, everything tonight. And can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All in favor?
Second.
All right, we're out, Kevin.